You touch on your book about this idea of like clean art, right? Just kind of over censoring, right? There's a chapter in your book where there's some colorful language in there, and
Yes.
so I'd love to just hear about what's the danger for Christians having an overly sanitized, overly censored sort of life, and what's a good way for us to pursue you know understanding this world, but also the not being of it.
Yeah.
How can we do that?
Oh man, it was one of my favorite chapters because um I feel as an artist, it just it really grinds my gears is looking at Christian art and feeling like it is not an accurate depiction of the world.
Yeah, yeah,
If I am going to make a movie, let me think about and I picked on it in the book, and I'm gonna pick on it now. I think I like Blind Side. I think I talk about it in the book. I'm not sure. Blind Side, for all intents and purposes, was was a pretty good movie, but it could have been much better. It could
mm,
have been a much better book. Um, I mean, much better. It could have been a much better movie. Very similar. I was in a movie called Grace Card, and I appreciate the people who gave me the opportunity to be in that movie. God bless the folks who contributed. But when I look at that movie, I think that movie could be a much better movie because there's two things that that movie deals with. And if we're looking at 2020 and 2021, we see that race is a very prevalent issue in our nation.
yes.
And the way that they deal with race in those movies is so contrived. It's so trite. It's
Mm,
like there's no like honkies. There's no strong language. Nobody's calling each other these racial epithets.
mm,
The way that they resolve the racial tension is quite like putrid. When we talk about conflict in those movies, the conflict is bland. There's no harsh language, and we know that not to be the real world. That is not the world we live in. And that's not only a disservice to the art, that's a disservice to grace. Because
mm,
if God only dies for a darn and a heck, then that makes grace look extremely cheap. And it makes it
mm,
seem like, well, God can't redeem the messiness of my life because look at all this Christian, like it's almost you have to be perfect before you even come to the Lord.
wow.
And
Yeah.
the problem is that when you desensitize the world, you also make Jesus seem as if his grace is not powerful and efficient to save the most wretched and darkest sins in the shadows of our society.
Mm,
And I think the more we actually expose the dark, the more we really talk about the dark, and we show how nasty and vile the dark is when you when Jesus shows up in the scene or through a form of redemption in whatever art we're talking about, it makes the hallelujah moment that much more glorious.
mm,
And Christian art is so consumed with the um, the consumer and not the message.
mm,
And we're more concerned with how do we create a culture that doesn't have, for parents don't that they don't have to actually castigate or investigate the materials, and so it's just easy, it's family friendly. And look, we need some of that, we need a lot of that, because the other side of this coin is that the world is it flirts with wickedness and vileness in a way that's not honest as well. They don't talk about the dangers um, of licentiousness, and so we don't want to be flippant with
mm.
wickedness. Um, we don't want to parade and romance the dark, but we also don't want to be ashamed to enter into the dark.